What happens when connection becomes addiction? When attention turns into a product and childhood becomes content? The answers may change the way you see your phone and yourself in the quiet moments of the morning. Before the sun has fully risen and the world has yet to begin its daily rush, millions of people reach for the same thing. Not a glass of water, not a loved one's hand, but a glowing rectangle, a smartphone. It has become, in less than 2 decades, the most intimate object in human life. For many, it is the first thing they see when they wake up and the last thing they look at before sleep. And for a generation of children and teenagers, it is more than a device. It is an entire universe condensed into a palm-sized screen. Social media platforms like TikTok, Snapchat, Instagram, and YouTube have turned that small screen into a portal of endless connection and endless comparison. They shape how young people think, what they desire, and even how they perceive themselves. But with this transformation has come a crisis of mental health, attention, and identity that societies around the world are only beginning to understand. This is a smartphone dilemma, a story not just about technology, but about childhood, parenting, profit, and power. The new childhood. Not long ago, childhood was defined by physical exploration. Streets, playgrounds, and classrooms were the main arenas of discovery. Today, those same experiences often unfold through screens. The smartphone has replaced the bicycle. TikTok challenges have replaced playground games. For children born after 2010, there has never been a world without touchscreens, notifications, and digital entertainment. Psychologists refer to them as Generation Glass, a generation raised behind glass panels that mediate nearly every social interaction. Studies from the World Health Organization and UNICEF show that the average 13-year-old now spends between 4 to 7 hours per day on their phone, much of it on social media platforms engineered to hold attention. The consequences are becoming visible: sleep deprivation, rising anxiety, and a growing sense of isolation despite constant connectivity. But this transformation didn't happen by accident. The business of attention. Every major platform, whether it's TikTok, Snapchat, or YouTube, is built on one core business model: the attention economy. In this system, time equals money. The longer users stay, the more ads they see, and the more data the company collects. That data, every swipe like pause and scroll, is analyzed by algorithms that learn what triggers pleasure, curiosity, and emotion. Over time, the platform becomes unerringly good at predicting what will keep a user hooked. For children and teens, whose brains are still developing impulse control and self-regulation, this is a perfect storm. The dopamine feedback loops created by likes, notifications, and streaks mimic the neurological effects of gambling. Every time a video loads, every ping of a message releases a small burst of reward. Neuroscientists have begun comparing this pattern of reward-seeking behavior to substance addiction. It's not metaphorical. Brain scans show similar activation patterns between heavy social media use and drug dependency. The role of algorithms. TikTok's algorithm is perhaps the most powerful example of this mechanism. It doesn't rely on who you follow or what you search for. It learns from what you watch. If you linger even for a few seconds on a particular kind of video, dance clips, beauty routines, or self-harm confessions, the algorithm notes your attention and sends you more of the same. For young users, this can quickly spiral into echo chambers that amplify insecurities. A teenage girl who pauses on diet-related videos might soon find her feed filled with extreme weight loss content. A lonely boy watching videos about depression could be flooded with darker themes that normalize despair. The algorithm's goal is engagement, not well-being. It doesn't know the difference between fascination and harm, and the deeper a user goes, the harder it becomes to look away. The psychology of connection and comparison. Humans are social creatures. We need belonging and validation. But in the digital age, belonging is quantified through followers, hearts, and views. What once depended on human warmth and community is now measured by numbers on a screen. This creates a paradox. The more connected we become, the more inadequate we feel. Studies by the American Psychological Association reveal a consistent pattern. The heaviest users of social media, especially teenage girls, report the lowest self-esteem and highest levels of anxiety. Dr. Jean Twenge, a psychologist studying generational behavior, notes that around 2012, The year smartphones became ubiquitous, rates of teenage depression and self-harm began to climb sharply across developed countries. The link is not simple causation, but the correlation is undeniable. A tool designed to connect people has, for many, become a mirror that distorts self-image and amplifies loneliness. The parent's dilemma. For parents, the smartphone dilemma is filled with contradictions. They want their children to be safe, informed, and socially integrated. But every effort to limit screen time feels like an act of isolation. In schools, messaging groups are the default communication channels. In friend circles, social media defines belonging. To take the phone away can feel like cutting a child off from their world. Yet, parents also witness the subtle changes, mood swings, restlessness, and late-night scrolling that erode sleep. Some describe it as watching their child disappear behind a screen. The modern household is a battlefield between convenience and caution. Parental control apps exist, but they're often bypassed. Digital well-being tools are installed, but the dopamine loop is stronger. Psychologists describe this as a generational empathy gap. Parents grew up in an analog world, their children in a digital one. The rules of engagement, attention, and social validation have been rewritten, and adults are still trying to understand them. Schools in the crossfire. Schools, too, face a dilemma. On one hand, smartphones can be powerful educational tools, gateways to information and collaboration. On the other, they are constant distractions that fragment focus and social behavior. In France, the government banned smartphones in schools up to age 15, citing mental health and attention concerns. Other countries, including the UK and Germany, have debated similar policies. Teachers report a dramatic drop in concentration among students. Homework becomes secondary to notifications. During breaks, conversations give way to silent scrolling sessions. In one study, students who left their phones outside the classroom performed significantly better on memory and reasoning tests. Simply having the phone nearby, even face down, was enough to reduce cognitive performance. The brain remains on alert, waiting for the next vibration. The digital economy of childhood. What makes this issue more complex is that children are not just users. They are data sources and marketing targets. Every interaction feeds corporate databases that learn to predict preferences with uncanny precision. A 12-year-old who watches beauty tutorials becomes part of an advertising pipeline that will follow her into adulthood, shaping not just what she buys, but how she feels about herself. Tech companies insist that users can control privacy through settings, but the default system is designed to collect as much as possible. Data is the currency of the digital age, and children's attention is among its most valuable commodities. Regulations like the EU's Digital Services Act and the U.S. Children's Online Privacy Protection Act attempt to limit this exploitation, but enforcement lags far behind innovation. The hidden cost of constant connection. Beyond mental health, the smartphone revolution is changing the way humans think. Attention spans are shortening. Deep reading and sustained focus are giving way to skimming and instant gratification. Neuroscientists warn that the constant barrage of stimuli from short-form content, 15-second TikToks, endless swipes, rewires the brain's reward system. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for decision-making and impulse control, is being conditioned to seek novelty over reflection. Teachers now describe classrooms where students struggle to read even a few pages of text without checking their phones. Conversations, too, have become fragmented. People speak, pause, and glance down, half present in both physical and digital realities. The double life of teenagers. Many teenagers live in two worlds, one physical, one digital. In the physical world, they attend school, meet friends, and maintain family routines. In the digital world, they craft identities, curate images, and perform versions of themselves designed for approval. The pressure to maintain this dual existence is immense. Online personas often differ from real-life personalities. A child may appear confident on Instagram, but struggle with insecurity offline. The dissonance creates psychological strain, an identity split between authenticity and performance. Sociologists call this the curated self, a digital mask shaped by societal trends and algorithmic feedback. When likes decline or comments turn negative, the mask cracks, and behind is often a young person grappling with rejection magnified by a global audience. The silent epidemic, loneliness in the age of connection. Despite being constantly connected, loneliness has surged. Surveys in Europe and North America show record levels of isolation among young people. Many report having hundreds of online friends, yet few real ones. Digital interaction lacks the subtle cues, tone, touch, body language that form emotional intimacy. The result is a paradox, a world buzzing with communication, but starved of connection. Some psychologists describe this as social malnutrition. The body receives calories but no nourishment, and the mind receives notifications but no empathy. Mental health consequences, and the new forms of addiction. The statistics, when examined closely, reveal a transformation in the mental landscape of youth. Over the last decade, hospital admissions for self-harm among adolescents have more than doubled in several Western countries. Surveys by the World Health Organization indicate that symptoms of anxiety and depression have become the leading causes of disability among teenagers worldwide. When researchers trace the timeline backward, an unmistakable pattern appears. The sharpest rise begins around 2011-2013, precisely the years when smartphones became affordable and when apps like Instagram and Snapchat exploded in popularity. Children now describe their lives in terms of notifications. Their self-worth, once drawn from family or friendship circles, is now entangled with digital reactions. The brain's reward circuitry, evolved to respond to genuine social feedback, cannot distinguish between a real smile and a heart emoji. Each vibration triggers a pulse of dopamine, the chemical of pleasure and motivation. But dopamine, like any reward mechanism, has a cost. The more it is artificially stimulated, the less responsive the system becomes. Psychiatrists have begun calling this dopamine fatigue, a dulling of the emotional system that leaves young people restless, joyless, and constantly searching for stronger stimulation. What once satisfied no longer does. A simple photo no longer garners enough likes. A short video no longer feels exciting. The loop continues. Create, post, wait, refresh, a ritual of validation that can never truly end. Anxiety in the palm of a hand. For many teens, the smartphone is not just entertainment. It is a source of constant tension. They fear missing messages, losing streaks, being excluded from group chats, or seeing gatherings they were not invited to. Psychologists call this the fear of missing out, or FOMO. It might sound trivial to adults, but to adolescents whose identity is built on peer acceptance, being left out digitally feels like social death. Each image of smiling faces at a party, each clip of laughter, becomes evidence of exclusion. Even sleep no longer offers full escape. Notifications arrive through the night, lighting up dark bedrooms with fragments of other people's lives. Surveys show that more than 70% of teenagers sleep with their phones within arm's reach, many waking several times to check updates. Chronic sleep deprivation, in turn, intensifies depression and weakens concentration, a feedback loop of exhaustion and anxiety. The illusion of choice. Platforms defend themselves by claiming users are control, that settings, filters, and time limits exist to promote balance. But behavioral scientists who study design psychology know otherwise. Apps are built around persuasive design, a discipline that applies cognitive science to influence decision-making. Infinite scroll removes stopping cues, so there is never a natural point to disengage. Variable rewards, sometimes like, sometimes not, keep the brain guessing, just like a slot machine. Push notifications create urgency, marked by red badges that exploit our instinctive response to danger colors. Even the delay between opening an app and seeing new content is intentional. The half-second of suspense mimics anticipation, increasing dopamine release. Children and teens, whose prefrontal cortex is still developing, cannot consistently resist these engineered hooks. They are not lacking discipline. They are up against billion-dollar systems optimized to capture attention. Social media and the body image trap. One of the most visible effects appears in body image. Filter perfection, carefully edited videos, and algorithmically promoted beauty ideals create a standard that no real person can match. A 12-year-old girl scrolling through her feed may encounter hundreds of flawless faces each day, her own reflection unfiltered, begins to feel inadequate. Eating disorder clinics report unprecedented cases of preteens influenced by online thinspiration trends. Even boys once thought immune to appearance anxiety now struggle with body dysmorphia, chasing the muscular physiques displayed in fitness reels. This distortion of self-perception erodes mental stability. Confidence becomes dependent on the mirror of the screen, not the reality of the body. And when approval fails to come, shame fills the void. Digital aggression and the hidden classroom of cruelty. In the digital playground, bullying no longer ends with the school bell. Social networks extend cruelty into bedrooms and midnight hours. A rumor once whispered now spreads instantly to hundreds. A humiliating photo, once forgotten, can resurface years later. Cyberbullying is not only more public, it is more permanent. Victims often describe the experience as being trapped in a cage that moves with them. There is no safe space, no true escape. The psychological toll is devastating. Withdrawal, paranoia, and, in severe cases, suicidal thoughts. Schools attempt to respond with anti-bullying programs. Yet teachers admit they often learn of incidents only after damage is done. Platforms claim to monitor harmful content through artificial intelligence, but the systems fail to detect subtler forms of abuse, sarcasm, coded language, or exclusion. The result is an environment where cruelty can hide behind humor and anonymity. The economics of addiction. Behind every scroll lies an economy. Advertising revenue depends on engagement metrics, time spent, clicks made, emotions provoked. To maximize those numbers, algorithms prioritize content that triggers strong reactions: outrage, envy, lust, or fear. Neutral information performs poorly. Emotionally charged posts thrive. Thus, the digital ecosystem rewards extremity. Children immersed in this environment learn that exaggeration gains attention, while moderation disappears into silence. This economic logic shapes culture itself. Outrage becomes entertainment, and self-exposure becomes a survival tactic. Tech companies insist they are giving people what they want. In truth, they are shaping what people want, sculpting desires through repetition and reward. The family disconnect. Parents watch, often helpless, as screens consume their children's attention. Family dinners fade into quiet gatherings of glowing faces. Conversations are interrupted by vibrations that seem to carry more urgency than human voices. When parents attempt to limit usage, they meet resistance, sometimes anger, sometimes tears. Children claim everyone else is online. The statement, though exaggerated, contains a painful truth. Social exclusion now happens in the digital domain as much as in the physical one. Researchers call this techno-parenting fatigue, the exhaustion of constantly negotiating boundaries that never seem to hold. Some families establish no-phone zones, others lock devices at night, yet enforcement often fails. The device has become both companion and captor. Cognitive overload and the fragmented mind. The human brain evolved to focus on one task at a time, switching attention slowly and deliberately. Smartphones demand the opposite. Rapid shifts between messages, videos, alerts, and apps. This constant toggling trains a brain toward continuous partial attention, a state of chronic distraction. Students report difficulty reading long texts, completing assignments, or even watching a full film without checking their phones. Memory studies reveal that multitasking degrades information retention. Each interruption forces the brain to reload context, wasting cognitive energy. Over years, this pattern reshapes neural pathways. Neuroscientist Daniel Levitin compares it to training for shallowness. The more we practice distraction, the more difficult deep thinking becomes. The loss of boredom. Before smartphones, boredom acted as a creative trigger. In those empty moments, the mind wandered, imagined, and daydreamed. Now, boredom has been eliminated, replaced by constant stimulation. Psychologists warn that the inability to tolerate boredom is stifling imagination. Children who once invented games now refresh feeds. Artists, writers, and scientists throughout history credited boredom as the seed of innovation, a mental pause where ideas form. Without it, creativity becomes scarce, replaced by imitation. Generational divide, parents, teachers, and digital natives. Adults often misinterpret the online world their children inhabit. When they see a teenager scrolling silently, they imagine passivity. In reality, that teen might be navigating complex social hierarchies, decoding hidden meanings, or managing subtle forms of peer pressure. Yet this doesn't mean adults are powerless. Some schools have begun integrating digital literacy education, teaching children how algorithms shape perception, how to verify information, and how to recognize manipulation. Early results are promising. When students understand that the For You page is a personalized mirror, not a window to reality, their relationship with social media changes. Awareness becomes a shield. The industry responds. Under pressure from governments and parents, major tech companies now speak of well-being tools. TikTok introduces screen time limits. Instagram hides like counts. Snapchat adds parental supervision features. Critics argue these measures are cosmetic, small bandages on structural wounds. The business model remains the same: monetize attention. True reform would require redesigning incentives, prioritizing user health over engagement statistics. Some insiders agree. Former engineers from Silicon Valley, including those behind early social media, have become whistleblowers. They describe internal discussions where ethical concerns were dismissed in favor of growth metrics. One former product designer at Facebook admitted, "We knew what we were doing. We just didn't know how to stop." Legal and policy frontiers. Governments are slowly awakening to the scale of the issue. In 2023, several European nations began requiring platforms to verify user age and limit algorithmic targeting for minors. The European Union's Digital Services Act compels transparency in recommendation systems and grants regulators access to platform data. In the United States, debates continue over the Kids Online Safety Act, which seeks to hold companies accountable for content that harms minors. Meanwhile, advocacy groups push for a universal right to disconnect, protecting individuals from after-hours digital intrusion. But technology evolves faster than legislation. Each new app emerges before the old ones are fully understood. Lawmakers chase shadows, and children remain the test subjects of an ongoing social experiment. Cultural shifts and the global divide. While wealthy nations debate screen time, billions in developing regions see smartphones as liberation, tools for education, business, and expression. A rural teenager in India or Nigeria can access the same global content as one in Berlin or New York. Yet, the same psychological traps apply. In communities where infrastructure is weak, digital platforms become substitutes for real opportunity. Influencer culture promises fame as a path out of poverty. For some, it works. For many, it ends in disappointment and debt. The smartphone thus mirrors society's inequalities. It empowers and exploits simultaneously. The redefinition of reality and the future of human attention. Reality, one of shared understanding grounded in physical experience, is now fractured into billions of personalized feeds. No two people scrolling on their phones inhabit the same world. Algorithms decide which truths we see, which stories we believe, and which emotions are amplified within us. Every timeline is a mirror, reflecting not the world itself, but the version of it that holds our attention longest. This fragmentation perception has deep psychological consequences. When each individual lives in a slightly altered reality, collective agreement on facts, morals, or meaning begins to dissolve. For young minds still forming a sense of identity, this digital subjectivity becomes a trap. What is real? What is staged? What is filtered? And what is truth? These questions once belonged to philosophers. Now they haunt teenagers scrolling through their phones before bed. In classrooms across the world, teachers describe a new kind of confusion. Students no longer argue about right or wrong. They argue about what actually happened. Videos, memes, and manipulated clips circulate faster than corrections. Truth becomes a matter of virality. The more shared an image is, the more real it seems. Researchers call this perception drift, a slow shift away from external verification toward emotional confirmation. People no longer ask, "Is it true?" They ask, "Does it feel true to me?" The brain, conditioned by personalized content, begins to filter reality the same way algorithms do, preferring comfort over challenge, agreement over contradiction. In such an environment, empathy weakens. It becomes harder to understand perspectives outside one's digital bubble because they simply don't appear on the feed. The disappearing line between public and private. Once, the boundary between private life and public persona was clear. Home was sanctuary. Diaries were locked. Mistakes faded with time. Now, every moment can be captured, uploaded, shared, and judged within seconds. Children learn early that visibility equals validation. Posting becomes not just a pastime, but a ritual of existence. I post, therefore I am. But visibility carries a cost. The private self erodes under constant performance. Young users begin to curate their lives for an audience, polishing every imperfection, deleting every failure. Over time, the curated version becomes the dominant identity. The person behind it, vulnerable, messy, human, fades into the background. Psychologists note rising cases of what they call identity fatigue, a quiet exhaustion born from maintaining an online self that never truly rests. This performative culture also breeds fear, the fear of being exposed, canceled, or forgotten. Children grow up under the gaze of an invisible audience, their mistakes archived forever. The internet never forgets. Attention as a new currency. In the 20th century, oil fueled economies. In the 21st, the fuel is attention. It powers platforms, elections, advertising, and cultural movements. Every second of focus is a commodity, measured, traded, and monetized. Human attention has limits. It can't expand indefinitely. Yet corporations compete for it, as if it were infinite. The result is an economy built on overstimulation. The brightest colors, the loudest sounds, the most dramatic claims, all are designed to cut through the noise, even if that means distorting reality. This arms race for engagement changes how media operates. News becomes infotainment. Education becomes clickbait. Even activism becomes performance measured in shares rather than substance. For young people, growing up inside this economy means learning to equate worth with visibility. The quiet virtues, patience, empathy, reflection, lose market value. The physiological cost. Constant connectivity doesn't only reshape minds, it alters bodies. Eye specialists report a sharp increase in digital eye strain, especially among teenagers. Blue light exposure disrupts circadian rhythms, delaying sleep cycles and affecting hormone production. Musculoskeletal disorders once seen in office workers now appear in 12-year-olds. Text neck, thumb strain, and posture-related headaches. Doctors describe a generation physically conditioned for scrolling. Shoulders hunched, spines curved, fingers twitching even when the phone is absent. Sleep deprivation compounds the damage. Studies show that teenagers who use their phones within an hour of bedtime experience disrupted REM cycles, leading to reduced emotional regulation and learning capacity. A single night of poor sleep impairs focus as much as mild intoxication. The digital body is restless, always anticipating the next vibration, never fully at rest. The emotional landscape of the digital age. Underneath the surface of connection lies a current of unease. Teenagers describe feeling both hypervisible and unseen, surrounded by content yet starved of intimacy. They confide not in parents or teachers, but in anonymous strangers online, because the algorithm always listens, even when humans don't. Counselors report an increase in what they term algorithmic companionship, emotional dependence on platforms that simulate empathy through likes, recommendations, and auto-replies. It's not real comfort, but it feels predictable, controllable, safe. Loneliness becomes self-perpetuating. The lonelier one feels, the more time one spends online seeking connection. The more time spent online, the lonelier one becomes. Digital childhood and lost innocence. There was a time when childhood ended gradually, with experience, responsibility, and discovery. Now it ends abruptly, the moment a child gains unfiltered access to the internet. Exposure to adult content, violence, and ideological extremism can occur before a child even understands what they're seeing. Algorithms, indifferent to morality, prioritize engagement above all. A 9-year-old exploring dance videos can, within a few clicks, find sexualized content. A curious 12-year-old searching for fitness tips may encounter harmful diet communities. Parents discover too late that their children's digital education has already begun, taught not by teachers, but by algorithms. This premature exposure compresses development. Children learn about desire, conflict, and identity in accelerated, distorted forms. Psychologists speak of developmental telescoping, a loss of gradual growth replaced by sudden, confusing leaps. Teachers on the front line. In classrooms, educators wrestle daily with distraction. Students arrive exhausted. Attention splintered by late-night scrolling. Assignments are plagiarized from AI tools. Friendships collapse over group chat misunderstandings, and bullying leaks from digital corridors into physical hallways. Some teachers adopt digital detox days, collecting phones in locked boxes before class. The difference, they say, is immediate. Eye contact returns, laughter fills the room, students rediscover boredom, and with it creativity. But enforcing such policies is difficult. Parents object, citing safety and accessibility. School administrators hesitate, fearing backlash. The result is compromise, partial bans, voluntary participation, inconsistent enforcement, cultural conditioning, and the myth of productivity. The smartphone promised efficiency, a tool to simplify life. Yet productivity, studies reveal the opposite. Constant connectivity fragments work, replacing deep focus with perpetual busyness. Adults mirror the same pattern seen in youth. The average person checks their phone over 150 times a day. Notifications disrupt tasks, resetting attention and reducing overall productivity. The illusion of multitasking hides a deeper fatigue, what psychologists term cognitive residue, the lingering attention left behind after every digital interruption. This constant switching erodes not only efficiency, but satisfaction. Even leisure becomes labor. Vacations are documented for social proof. Hobbies are monetized for content. Rest is optimized for metrics. The smartphone, once a servant, becomes a taskmaster whispering, "You could be doing more." Artificial companions and the next phase. As artificial intelligence integrates into social platforms, a new phenomenon emerges: synthetic friendship. AI chatbots, trained on human conversation, simulate empathy, humor, and understanding. For lonely users, they provide companionship without risk of judgment. Yet psychologists warn that such relationships, while comforting, may weaken real-world empathy. When a friend can be muted or customized, the complexity of human emotion feels burdensome. Children who grow up confiding in AI companions may struggle with the unpredictability of human relationships. Conflict resolution, patience, and forgiveness, skills forged in real interaction, atrophy when replaced by algorithmic sympathy. The erosion of memory. With every photo automatically archived and every moment recorded, memory itself is changing. Once, people remembered selectively, the mind preserving what mattered most. Now, digital storage externalizes memory, turning recollection into retrieval. Neuroscientists warn that this outsourcing of memory weakens neural pathways associated with recall and narrative building. We no longer remember experiences as stories. We remember them as images tagged with timestamps. Even emotion fades differently. A photo replaces a feeling it was meant to evoke, flattening nostalgia into pixels. Digital empires and global influence. The reach of a few corporations now spans the entire globe. TikTok, Meta, Google, and Snap shape the attention of billions. Their design choices influence elections, cultural norms, and even language. A viral sound on TikTok can redefine global fashion trends. A YouTube recommendation algorithm can radicalize or educate depending on what it amplifies. This power exceeds that of traditional media empires. It is invisible, personalized, and continuous. In democratic societies, this raises profound questions. Who controls the flow of information? Who decides what a child in one country sees compared to another? And can any government truly regulate a system that transcends borders? Resistance in the search for balance. Amid the noise, a quiet counter-movement grows. Digital minimalists, designers, teachers, parents, and teens themselves begin to question the role of technology in their lives. Some return to analog tools, paper journals, physical books, in-person meetings. Others use technology intentionally, setting strict boundaries and curating feeds with care. They advocate for digital literacy, not as a rejection of progress, but as a reclaiming of agency, to use the tool without being used by it, That becomes a new definition of freedom. Workshops in schools now teach students to analyze how apps manipulate their attention. Some families adopt screen Sabbaths, 1 day a week without devices. Initial discomfort gives way to relief, and silence slowly feels natural again. Digital dependency, emotional resilience, and the future of a human mind. Dependency is rarely a conscious choice. It begins with small habits. The morning glance at notifications, the idle scroll during meals, the phone resting beside the pillow at night. Slowly, the rhythm of daily life begins to bend around the device. What starts as a convenience becomes a reflex. What begins as a connection becomes a need. For children and adolescents, the line between preference and dependence is even thinner. Their identities form in tandem with technology. Many can no longer remember a time before endless connectivity. When asked to imagine a day without their phone, they describe feelings of anxiety, loss, and even physical discomfort. Psychologists now refer to this as nomophobia, the fear of being without one's mobile device. This dependency is not just psychological. It is biological. The reward centers of the brain, trained through repetition, expect the small surges of dopamine delivered by each notification. When deprived, the body experiences withdrawal similar to that triggered by caffeine or nicotine. Mood swings, irritability, and restlessness follow. In severe cases, this manifests as panic, a desperate urge to reconnect, to refresh, to check again. Parents notice subtle symptoms. Their child grows agitated when the Wi-Fi lags, distracted during conversation, restless in silence. The digital tether pulls constantly, whispering the promise of stimulation, of belonging, of something new just beyond the next swipe. The architecture of dependence. To understand how dependency is engineered, one must look behind the screen. Each interface, each animation, each buzz is a calculated nudge. Designers speak of user engagement and retention, but in essence, they are crafting behavioral loops. The red color of notifications isn't random. It signals urgency, commanding the visual cortex. The placement of buttons, the timing of content refreshes, the subtle vibrations, all are tuned through data. Millions of micro-experiments determine which patterns keep fingers moving and eyes fixed. This is not villainy in the cinematic sense. It is optimization. But when optimization targets the human nervous system, the result is manipulation. The user becomes a product, and attention becomes the raw material. The cost to emotional resilience. Children once learned resilience through direct experience, losing a game, facing conflict, enduring boredom, reconciling with friends. Each challenge strengthened emotional muscles. Now, many of those experiences are mediated or avoided altogether through screens. A disagreement can be resolved by blocking someone. Discomfort can be silenced by distraction. Boredom is erased before it teaches patience. The consequence is subtle but profound. Emotions that would once have been processed and integrated are now interrupted and deferred. Therapists report young clients who struggle to name their feelings. They describe anxiety as weird vibes, sadness as a low battery. Emotional vocabulary shrinks, mirroring the simplicity of emojis and reaction buttons. Without the language to articulate emotion, regulation becomes harder. Stress accumulates unrecognized. Frustration bursts into anger or retreats into numb scrolling. The ability to sit with discomfort, to endure uncertainty without immediate relief, weakens. Relationships in the age of constant contact. Paradoxically, constant communication can make genuine connection harder. Before smartphones, relationships relied on presence, listening, waiting, responding with intention. Now, contact is continuous but fragmented. Couples message throughout the day, but rarely speak deeply at night. Friends react to posts instead of sharing experiences. Teenagers often equate friendship with visibility. If someone doesn't comment or reply quickly, doubt creeps in. Social validation becomes measurable, and affection becomes performance. The phrase seen but not replied can end friendships. Psychologists warn that this quantification of intimacy erodes trust. When affection is tracked through streaks, likes, or message counts, relationships turn into data points. The subtle, unspoken gestures of care, tone, pause, eye contact, are lost in translation. The attention economy and the fragmented self. Human attention is finite, but the digital world demands infinity. Each app competes for the same resource, the mind's focus. The result is a constant tug-of-war between obligations, entertainment, and selfhood. Neuroscientists have observed that when attention is repeatedly fractured, the brain's default mode changes. It begins to anticipate interruption, craving novelty even during calm moments. This makes sustained tasks, reading, studying, thinking, feel uncomfortable. The stillness of focus feels unnatural after years of fragmentation. Writers, artists, and thinkers describe a new struggle, the inability to sustain creative momentum. Where once they could work for hours in solitude, they now reach for distraction every few minutes. The very tool that promised creativity now undermines it. For adolescents who are still forming cognitive habits, this is particularly dangerous. A mind trained to switch constantly may never learn to settle, to contemplate, to build depth. In a world that rewards speed over substance, depth becomes a casualty. Mental fatigue and the myth of multitasking. Society praises multitasking as efficiency, yet the brain cannot truly process multiple streams of information simultaneously. What it does instead is switch rapidly, burning energy each time it refocuses. Every notification, every glance at a new message costs mental bandwidth. Cognitive scientists estimate that these micro-disruptions can reduce productivity by up to 40%. But the deeper cost lies in mental exhaustion, a sense of scattered energy, of thinking in fragments rather than wholes. This exhaustion doesn't always feel like tiredness. Sometimes it manifests as irritability, apathy, or the strange feeling of being busy but unfulfilled. The phone becomes both the cause of fatigue and the illusion of relief. We scroll to escape overwhelm, but the scrolling itself deepens it. Children, an illusion of multiplied identity. On social media, a single teenager may maintain multiple personas. One for friends, one for family, one secret. Each demands curation. The boundaries between these selves blur, producing anxiety. Which version of me is real? Which one do people love? Sociologists describe this as identity inflation, the proliferation of selves that dilutes authenticity. In extreme cases, it can lead to dissociation, a detachment from the sense of who one truly is. The human psyche evolved to inhabit roles sequentially: child, student, friend, worker. The digital world compresses them into simultaneous performance. A 15-year-old can, within the same minute, post a joke to classmates, respond to a parent's message, and receive a notification from a stranger commenting on appearance. This constant switching between emotional contexts strains the mind's coherence. Digital stress and physiological response. The body responds to digital stress the same way it responds to physical threat. Each ping and alert triggers a microsurge of cortisol, the fight-or-flight hormone. Over time, chronic exposure leads to heightened baseline stress levels. Sleep studies show that teenagers who receive frequent nighttime notifications have elevated cortisol, even during rest, suggesting that their bodies remain on alert. This perpetual vigilance contributes to fatigue, weakened immunity, and mood instability. The irony is striking. A device meant to simplify life keeps the body in a constant state of readiness, as if danger were always imminent. Empathy in decline. Perhaps the most worrying consequence of digital dependence is the erosion of empathy. Face-to-face interaction teaches subtle cues: tone, posture, silence. Online communication reduces emotion to symbols and shorthand. Misunderstanding thrives in brevity. Researchers at the University of Michigan found a 40% decline in empathy among college students compared to their peers 20 years ago. The steepest drop coincided with the rise of smartphones. Without frequent real-world interaction, the neural circuits responsible for empathy, the mirror neurons, receive less stimulation. Children who grow up behind screens may become adept at decoding emojis, but less skilled at reading human faces. The cost is societal as well as personal. Empathy underpins cooperation, democracy, and morality. Its erosion frays the fabric of collective life. Addiction by design. How platforms sustain engagement. Every major platform relies on three psychological levers: variable reward, social proof, and loss aversion. Variable reward keeps users guessing. Not every post gets likes, not every video goes viral, but the possibility keeps engagement high. Social proof ensures that popularity signals value. If many approve, it must be good. Loss aversion creates the fear of missing out. Messages that disappear, streaks that break, followers that might be lost. Together, these levers form a behavioral loop difficult even for adults to resist. For adolescents, they are nearly irresistible. When companies deny responsibility, they argue that users can simply choose restraint. But as behavioral economists point out, choice is not neutral when design exploits human vulnerabilities. The new landscape of learning. Education faces a silent revolution. Teachers report that student capacity for sustained reading has declined dramatically. A textbook page competes with the entire internet, and it rarely wins. Yet technology also offers unprecedented access to knowledge. Virtual labs, global classrooms, instant translation. The challenge is not access, but discipline. Some progressive schools are adapting by teaching metacognition, the ability to be aware of one's attention, to notice distraction, and to consciously return to focus. Early programs show promise. Students trained in mindfulness and deliberate attention outperform peers in both memory and creativity. In Finland and Japan, schools have introduced slow reading sessions, 10 minutes of silent reading from paper books each morning. Teachers report calmer classrooms and deeper comprehension. The economics of childhood influence. Influencer culture has turned childhood into a brand opportunity. Children watch peers unbox toys, model clothes, or vlog daily routines. Many aspire to join them. Some parents encourage it, opening family channels that document their children's lives for millions of viewers. Behind the smiling thumbnails lies a complex moral question. When a child's image becomes a source of income, who owns their privacy? Several countries now debate laws granting children the right to delete their digital past, a right to be forgotten. Sociologists fear that growing up as content subjects may blur the boundary between authenticity and performance permanently. Children learn that emotion is valuable only when monetized, that moments exist to be captured, not lived. Digital resilience, teaching the mind to withstand overload. Resilience in the digital age doesn't mean rejection. It means mastery. Programs in Scandinavia, Canada, and South Korea focus on training children to recognize manipulation and regulate emotion online. They teach delayed gratification, the ability to pause before reacting, to observe rather than consume. Neuroscientists call this strengthening the executive function, the mental muscle that governs self-control. Simple practices help. Silent meals without phones, scheduled offline hours, gratitude journaling, even time spent in nature. Each reinforces a sense that satisfaction can exist outside the screen. Parents, too, are encouraged to model restraint. Children mirror behavior more than instruction. A parent who scrolls through dinner teaches that attention is divisible. One who puts the phone away teaches presence. Technology and the rewiring of hope. Despite all dangers, technology also carries potential. Smartphones connect isolated voices, mobilize communities, democratize education, and document injustice. The challenge is not the existence of technology, but the absence of balance. Human history is filled with tools that outpace wisdom: fire, industry, atomic energy. Each demanded ethical evolution. The smartphone is no different. It amplifies both empathy and indifference, knowledge and noise. The future will depend on whether societies can cultivate what philosophers call digital virtue, the conscious alignment of technology with human values. Societal transformation, collective responsibility, and the psychology of change. Every generation faces a defining challenge, a test that reveals not only its technological capacity, but its moral compass. For our era, that challenge is how to live meaningfully in the presence of machines that know us better than we know ourselves. The smartphone, once a symbol of freedom and access, has quietly become a mirror of our collective anxieties. It records not only what we search, but what we crave, what we fear, what we hide. It knows our waking hours, our sleep cycles, the rhythm of our loneliness. It studies us, learns us, and then reflects us back to ourselves through carefully filtered images of desire. But technology, as powerful as it is, does not create culture, it amplifies it. The smartphone merely magnifies what already lies within, our yearning for connection, validation, recognition, and meaning. To confront its influence, we must confront our own nature. The digital mirror, how society reinforces the cycle. In cities across the world, from Tokyo to New York, from Karachi to Nairobi, one can witness the same sight. Faces illuminated by blue light, heads bowed not in prayer but in attention to a glowing rectangle. Public life has become quieter, but not more peaceful. We no longer look up at billboards. We carry them in our hands. Every moment of idleness, a bus ride, a queue, an elevator trip, becomes an opportunity for consumption. We consume news, opinions, outrage, comedy, tragedy, all within seconds of each other. The emotional contrast leaves the psyche overstimulated, yet undernourished. Society, meanwhile, rewards this pattern. Productivity is measured in response times, visibility in followers, relevance and virality. Even institutions that once represented reflection, schools, churches, libraries, now struggle to compete for attention. In the rush for efficiency, we have mistaken speed for wisdom. The political economy of attention. Attention has become the world's most valuable currency. Every app, platform, and algorithm is designed to capture and trade it. The longer you stay, the more data you generate. The more data, the more valuable you become. Governments, too, benefit indirectly. Engagement means information, and information means influence. In many democracies, political campaigns are no longer won through debate, but through micro-targeting. The subtle art of feeding personalized narratives to segmented audiences. This weaponization of psychology, perfected by both corporations and political strategists, blurs the boundary between persuasion and manipulation. When a 15-year-old scrolls through an endless feed of filtered lives, or when a voter receives selectively curated facts, both are subject to invisible forces that shape belief without consent. What happens to democracy when its citizens are distracted, divided, and emotionally manipulated by design? What happens to childhood when identity is shaped not by experience but by algorithms predicting desire? The answers are still unfolding, but the trajectory is clear. Societies that fail to protect the cognitive independence of their people risk losing not just attention, but autonomy. The culture of comparison and the psychology of inadequacy. In the digital realm, everyone performs success. Vacations, relationships, achievements, all are curated and broadcast for validation. The audience, in turn, measures their own lives against these projections. Psychologists call this a comparison trap, a cycle of constant self-evaluation against filtered ideals. Teenagers are particularly vulnerable. Their sense of worth, still forming, becomes tethered to metrics beyond their control. Likes, shares, comments. A missed post or a low-performing picture can trigger anxiety or shame disproportionate to reality. The human brain evolved to belong to small tribes of perhaps 100 individuals. In those tribes, social approval was vital for survival. Now, through social media, each person's tribe has expanded to thousands, even millions, amplifying away the judgment to unbearable proportions. The paradox is painful. The more connected we become, the lonelier we feel. Loneliness in the age of connection. Loneliness used to be a condition of isolation. Today, it can exist amid constant conversation. You can speak to hundreds, yet feel unseen. You can be tagged, mentioned, followed, and still be profoundly alone. Digital communication allows us to share updates without vulnerability, to signal emotions without revealing their depth. This creates a shallow intimacy, comforting but fragile. The more we rely on it, the less capable we become of sustaining deeper, slower relationships. In clinical studies, chronic loneliness is now associated with higher rates of depression, anxiety, heart disease, and even premature death. Ironically, the devices meant to connect us have intensified one of humanity's oldest forms of suffering. A psychologist in Berlin described it this way: loneliness today isn't the absence of people, it's the absence of presence. Parental dilemmas in the digital home. For parents, the question is no longer whether to give a child a phone, but when and how much control to exert. Banning devices entirely seems unrealistic. Granting unrestricted access feels reckless. Many households become battlefields of negotiation. Just 10 more minutes. I need it for homework. Everyone else has won. The child's argument often echoes peer pressure, while the parent's response echoes fear. Fear of harm, but also fear of exclusion. The truth lies in balance, but balance requires effort. Family therapists suggest that technology boundaries work best when framed as shared values, not punishments. For instance, replacing no phone at dinner with dinner is for conversation. Replacing no screens before bed with let's protect our sleep together. When boundaries feel communal rather than authoritarian, children are more likely to respect them. Schools as the new battleground. Education systems are grappling with an unprecedented paradox. Digital literacy is essential, yet digital distraction is destructive. Schools that integrate technology must now also teach its restraint. Some have introduced device lockers, allowing students to store phones during class. Others experiment with hybrid learning, alternating between screen-based lessons and physical interaction. The most successful programs treat digital control as a skill, not a punishment. Children are taught to analyze their own behavior. How many times do I check my phone per hour? How do I feel before and after scrolling? This reflective practice, known as digital metacognition, encourages awareness rather than shame. Early studies indicate that such programs reduce anxiety and improve academic focus by up to 30%. The message is simple. The goal is not disconnection, but discernment, the business of childhood. Behind every app and video targeting young users lies a complex network of monetization. Games reward attention with virtual coins. Streaming platforms feed personalized suggestions. Influencers sell lifestyles disguised as advice. For corporations, the younger the user, the more valuable the habit. Early exposure ensures lifelong loyalty. This is why some platforms design interfaces that mimic the look of adult apps, but with friendlier icons and lighter colors. Familiar enough to train recognition, harmless enough to escape scrutiny. Consumer psychologists admit that children are the ultimate testing ground for behavioral engineering. Their brains, still developing impulse control, are ideal subjects for reward conditioning. In a sense, childhood itself has become an open market, and innocence a commodity. The invisible classroom, social media as teacher. Beyond formal education, children learn constantly from the digital world. Influencers teach them what is normal. Algorithms decide what is cool, and trends dictate what is worthy. This is the new invisible classroom, a global network of unregulated teachers. Unlike schools, these lessons have no curriculum, no ethics, no accountability. A teenager might absorb 6,000 messages a day through social media, each shaping perception, values, and self-image. The cumulative effect is cultural confusion. Children develop moral frameworks influenced as much by content creators as by parents or teachers. The line between information and ideology blurs. A psychologist from London summarizes it bluntly. We have outsourced moral education to algorithms. The psychological cost of validation. Every like delivers a pulse of dopamine. Over time, the brain begins to crave it not as pleasure, but as proof of existence. Without validation, insecurity festers. Posts are deleted if they don't perform well. Identities are curated to fit imagined expectations. This cycle creates emotional fragility. The self becomes externalized, dependent on invisible approval. For young minds, this is particularly damaging. Self-worth, once built on experience and inner achievement, now rests on public reaction. The result is a generation highly expressive yet deeply insecure, fluent in presentation, but uncertain in authenticity. Therapists report a new form of anxiety, post-performance emptiness, the hollow feeling that follows a high of online attention. It's the emotional hangover of digital fame, the fragmented family. In many households, family members share the same space but inhabit different digital worlds. The living room, once a place of conversation, becomes a cluster of screens facing away from each other. Children laugh at memes their parents don't understand. Parents scroll through work emails while pretending to watch TV. Even toddlers, handed tablets for silence, learn that attention is negotiable. Sociologists describe this as co-isolation, the condition of being together but apart. It erodes empathy within families, reducing emotional attunement between generations. Parents worry about their children's screen time, but rarely examine their own. Yet the child's gaze often mirrors the parent's. The phone at dinner, the half-listened story, the distracted nod, these become templates for future behavior. To heal this disconnection, families must first rediscover the value of shared silence, moments without screens, where presence itself becomes conversation. The algorithmic parent. Today's algorithms function like invisible guardians, recommending content, curating entertainment, suggesting what's best. But unlike parents, algorithms have no moral compass. Their goal is engagement, not growth. When a child watches a harmless dance video, the algorithm learns and escalates, suggesting similar clips, then slightly more provocative ones, then perhaps something entirely different but emotionally charged. This is how innocence drifts into exposure, not by intent but by design. Studies show that within just 30 minutes of unsupervised browsing, a 12-year-old can be led from harmless fun to harmful content. The algorithm isn't malicious. It's mathematical. It seeks only to keep the user watching. In this way, technology mimics addiction's oldest trick, disguising harm as reward. Digital trauma, cognitive fatigue, and the ethics of innovation. Beneath the glossy surface of modern convenience, there is a quieter epidemic taking shape, one of exhaustion, overstimulation, and silent despair. Children wake up anxious without knowing why. Adults feel perpetually distracted, emotionally drained, and unable to rest even when the phone is off. The constant exposure to information, comparison, and invisible pressure has created a psychological landscape that feels both wired and weary. Neuroscientists describe this as cognitive fatigue, a depletion of mental energy caused by unrelenting input. Our brains, evolved to navigate a world of gradual change and natural rhythm, now endure thousands of microstimuli each hour. Messages, sounds, videos, flashing icons. Each moment demands a reaction, a choice, a click. The result is not stimulation, but overload. This fatigue seeps into all corners of life. Conversations lose depth, sleep becomes restless, creativity feels dimmed. For many, the only relief from a noise of screens is more screens, a distraction from the distraction. And so begins a cycle of digital trauma, subtle but chronic stress from living in a state of constant partial attention. It is not dramatic like the trauma of war or loss, but accumulates quietly, reshaping emotional stability and the ability to find calm and stillness. The moral dilemma of innovation. Technology has always been a double-edged tool, capable of immense progress and immense harm. The question is no longer whether innovation should continue, but whether it can evolve responsibly. Engineers and app developers now sit in positions once reserved for philosophers and policymakers. Their code determines behavior, shapes communication, even influences democracy. But rarely do those decisions include moral deliberation. Profit, efficiency, and engagement metrics overshadow questions of human dignity, mental health, and truth. The ethical dilemma lies not in creating smarter tools, but in deciding what kind of humanity those tools serve. Will we continue to optimize for attention, the cheapest currency of the digital age, or will we choose to optimize for understanding, empathy, and growth? The answer will define not just the future of technology, but the future of what it means to be human. Signs of awakening toward digital wisdom. Amid this complexity, something remarkable is beginning to happen. A growing movement of parents, educators, and even tech insiders are calling for change. Former engineers from Silicon Valley now advocate for humane technology, where design respects human rhythm and attention span. Schools experiment with digital fasting weeks, encouraging students to reconnect with the physical world. Even major companies, once obsessed with engagement metrics, are beginning to speak of well-being metrics and screen time balance. Across continents, families rediscover simple rituals, shared meals without phones, weekend walks without GPS, bedtime stories read from paper instead of tablets. These moments are small rebellions against a machine of endless distraction. They remind us that presence, not performance, is what defines connection. Reclaiming humanity in a wired world. The path forward will not be easy. True digital balance demands both systemic reform and personal courage. We must teach our children and ourselves that technology is a servant, not a master. We must question the culture of speed, reclaim silence, and rediscover patience. This means rethinking success, too. Perhaps the measure of progress is not how fast we connect, but how deeply we understand. Not how much data we store, but how much wisdom we cultivate. The world will continue to advance. Artificial intelligence will grow sharper, devices smaller, algorithms smarter. But none of it will matter if humanity forgets how to listen, feel, and rest. The future is not about rejecting technology. It is about remembering ourselves within it, a call for reflection. As we stand on the edge of this digital revolution, one question remains. Can we reclaim control before we lose what makes us human? The answer lies not in any government or company, but in each individual's daily choice. When to look up, when to put the phone down, when to truly see another person's eyes instead of their profile. Technology reflects us, our hopes, our fears, our values. If we wish to change what it shows, we must first change what we are. So tonight, when the screen fades and silence fills the room, pause for a moment. Ask yourself, who am I without the phone in my hand? Who am I when no one is watching? Because in that silence lies something the algorithm can never calculate. The depth of your humanity. Studio Microphone, this is the story of our time. A story of technology, temptation, and the timeless struggle to stay human. If this documentary made you think, share your thoughts in the comment below. We'd love to hear your perspective, your struggles, your reflections, your hopes for a more mindful digital future. And if you believe conversations like this matter, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel, Zimo Voice. Together, let's keep the dialogue alive. One story, one reflection, one voice at a time.